if you know anybody who has a reflux baby, if you know anyone who has a CMPA baby, it's likely that they've been going through a really tough time and they need support and they need people to check in on them and they need someone to hold their screaming infant while they try not to go insane in the corner. And they need help with their other children. They need more than a typical new mother would need. You know, I Google things, does she hate me? Why does my baby not like me? I Googled newborn autism signs. How do you know if there's something seriously wrong with your baby? All these, like, she just was screaming and screaming and screaming and they were just kind of looking at me like, but I was so used to it. I was like, I kind of nearly felt like I should just go home because I was upsetting everybody else. Her screams were upsetting other people. Welcome to my channel. My name is Laura and I want to make a video about CMPA, which is cow's milk protein allergy. And the reason why I want to make it today is because I'm in this Facebook group, as most of us are, you know, and it's a doctor mummy face group. So I can't remember if I mentioned before, but I'm a doctor and I'm on maternity leave at the moment. Anyway, so it's a doctor mummy face group and there's thousands and thousands and thousands of doctor mummies in it. And somebody posted wanting to know more about CMPA, and the reason why they wanted to post it, the reason why they were posting about it was because they had read some, you know, doctor bashing, GP bashing on other Facebook groups. So obviously I was all over it because I feel very passionate about it. CMPA has made the last 9 months extremely difficult for us and for our family, and some of the replies were implying that it's over-medicalized, it's over-diagnosed, that sometimes they want free formula and this sort of stuff, and it just made me so annoyed. It was a bull to a red flag. I was just furious because, and then I had to like rein myself in, because before I knew about CMPA, maybe I would have thought the same. Maybe I would have thought, oh, it's overdiagnosed. Some babies cry, you know, just deal with it. It's just some babies are more upset than other babies. And then like I had Imogen and I'm like, I'm so sorry to every mother I have ever judged for a crying infant, because you have no idea what they're going through. You have no idea what the baby is crying. Even just thinking about it just makes me well up. Just how difficult it was. But anyway, to talk about something, sometimes you need to go back to the beginning. So I was induced 38 weeks for reduced fetal movements over a couple of days. They admitted me and they were monitoring and stuff, and her growth had slowed. She kind of stopped growing. So my first baby was 9 pounds 3 and Imogen was 7 pounds. Anyway, so the labour was wonderful. They went above and beyond. I cannot thank them enough. It was an amazing experience. So happy. But I had group B strep, and long story short, born on the Monday, by Friday she had been readmitted from home to the neonatal intensive care unit with sepsis, which they feel came from a urinary tract infection. And it was really crap because this was back in May and it was when COVID was just around a short time. The restrictions were really severe in the hospital that I was in. I was allowed to visit for 2 hours a day, so I was allowed 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the evening. So I was allowed to decide whatever way I wanted to like divide up my 2 hours. So I did 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening, and I just wasn't allowed to see her other than that. And at the time I found this very difficult, as you can imagine, because she was a newborn and we were in a private room, so I didn't understand why, if I'm in there an hour, what's the difference between an hour and 10 minutes? Do I suddenly just start like... Anyway, so it was very difficult, but she came home from hospital 6 days later after a big spate of IV antibiotics. But while she was in there, they needed to give her formula, and then she broke out in this really bad rash, and that rash ended up lasting about 6 or 7 weeks. But anyway, brought her home and she was just different. She started screaming and crying just all the time, and it started to pick up as the days went on. And my mom had moved in to help me look after her because, you know, we couldn't be coming and going, so she had to self-isolate for 2 weeks and then move in with us so that she could help me. And mum would be saying things like, this child is standing, this child is standing, and like she was, you'd be trying to wind her on your knee, and you know you're holding her at the front and you're kind of rubbing her back, and she would stand up between your legs, rigid as a board, fists clenched, screaming, absolutely puce in the face, just this high-pitched, horrible screaming that never ended. And because when she was in NICU I wasn't able to breastfeed her, she developed a bottle preference, which is fair enough. I mean, I'm not surprised that happened, but that's another story for another day. But I couldn't really even get her to feed. Trying to get her to breastfeed was a nightmare. She was on, off, scream, 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 back arch, scream, fist clenched, scream, scream, on, yes, no, yes, no. And this one was so distressing, trying to get her to latch, and I'm thinking, am I being totally selfish here? Why am I trying to make her latch and she clearly doesn't want to? Trying with bottles, because I had been expressing, so we had breast milk, and tried to give her that, and she was on, off the bottle, on, off, yes, no, scream, scream, back arch, standing, and it was never ending. It was all day. So I remember around 2 weeks I was Googling, as you do, and first of all I just doubted myself. I thought, this is just newborns, I just forgot what it's like. No I didn't. My first was not like this. So I was Googling, and it was saying, oh no, colic kind of starts around 2 weeks, or maybe it was peaks around 2 weeks, it's all a blur. And I was like, oh my god, I think my baby has colic, and I just was kind of rumbling along, and I just didn't know, and I was kind of saying it to people like, oh, I'm really worried, there's something wrong with her, but people were all like, oh yeah, this is just newborns and babies cry, and people sending me like links about, you know, purple crying and those graphs where, you know, you've got a high crying baby or a low crying baby, and so you just have a high crying baby and stuff, and it kind of really made me doubt myself. Anyways, the weeks went on, I started doing Googling, and I joked before, I was like, there is no better detective than a mother with a medical degree. I was like, I read and I read and I read. And I started to piece it all together, and I thought, oh my goodness, she has cow's milk protein allergy, and she definitely has reflux. And then I had reined myself in and say, no, you're over medicalizing, you know, it's just because it's been a very tough time, you know, she was very sick in NICU and da-da-da-da. But I was like, no, I really think this is what it is. And I joined groups on Facebook to learn more about it, and I joined the doctor versions of it, where they would share, you know, guidelines and medical information and things that weren't just stories. It was like, you know, medical evidence, things like that. Anyway, so when I went to my GP, I had 6 weeks, and I tried to explain to her, I was like, she is howling day and night. I mean, she is not sleeping, I'm not sleeping. She used to be upright the whole time, you cannot lay her flat. I could count how many times she was not screaming, and it was just so bad. And I was trying to explain this to the GP while I was like bouncing her, because it's the only thing that kind of tamed the screams a bit, was if you kept moving and kept bouncing and and going shush. And the GP was just like, oh yeah, no, Gaviscon. And I was kind of like, yeah, well no, I think we're kind of beyond Gaviscon, and anyway I can't get her to take anything. And she's like, no, Gaviscon first, and then we'll review it then. And she just didn't want to talk about proton pump inhibitors like Losec and I asked her, like, I'm really worried this could be cow's milk protein allergy. I've done a lot of reading. And she said, look, is she pooing blood? And I said, no. She said, well then it's not cow's milk protein allergy. And I kind of said, okay, because you don't know, you're vulnerable, you're a new mom. I was so sleep deprived, I was so upset that my baby was so distressed all the time, that I just said, okay, whatever you think, okay. And she was very experienced and a lovely doctor, and I'm sure amazing in many, many ways, but the thing is that you can't know everything about everything, and to expect anybody to know everything about everything is ridiculous. That's the internet, you know. Other than that, she has experience and she has knowledge, and she has areas that she's stronger at and weaker at and all that, and maybe cow's milk protein allergy is not something she's that strong at, and that's fine. But I just wish she would have taken, you know, asked me more questions, and, you know, really addressed what the issue was, and not just said Gaviscon and on your merry way kind of thing. So went home, trying to give her the Gaviscon was a cruel joke, because I couldn't get her to feed. So, and now I was supposed to get 15 mils of Gaviscon into her. So I was putting it in a teat of a bottle and trying to lie her flat and trying to like get her to suckle it that way. And she wouldn't swallow. She was just screaming. I was like, how am I going to see? She told me it could take 2 weeks for the Gaviscon to show if it was improving. I was like, how am I supposed to see if this is going to work if I can't actually get her to take it? So more Googling, more Facebook groups, more mom researching, and there was this really helpful Irish group for surviving reflux, and I saw this post about this pediatrician who people said recommended him, said that he was very knowledgeable about the topic and very kind and listened and whatever, and I would have remortgaged my house if it meant we could have stopped the screaming. I would have paid anything, and that's the other sad thing, is that we were in a position to go private. We were in the position to have that little bit of extra money to throw at the problem, and loads of families don't. And that's what, even now if I think about that, that makes me so upset that there's families out there that aren't being listened to, and there's nowhere for them to turn. They have no options, and it's just so difficult. Anyway, so had a consultation through Zoom with this paediatrician who asked me 1,000,001 questions, and at the end of it, I won't get into the details of it, but he felt she would benefit from low-sec omeprazole. He diagnosed her with severe reflux, explained why it was severe, why it wasn't, just medium reflux or mild. And he was asking me, how her sleep was, and I had been keeping a track on an app of how much I was pumping, because I need to keep track of the volumes, but I was also keeping track of what her sleep was like, because that was important. So some nights I wasn't getting any sleep, and I mean not even a minute's sleep. People say, oh, I had no sleep last night. I didn't get any sleep. So the next day I would have to hand her over in the morning and just say, nearly be in tears, and just say it was just so bad. It was just, we were so traumatized by the whole thing. But I would have to hold her upright. And he asked me things like, is she on an incline? Are you holding her up after feet? Are you da-da-da? And I was like, tick, 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 tick. Everything I could have possibly done conservatively, in the non-medical route, I had done, but it was just not like a blind bit of difference. So anyway, he felt that I should go dairy-free and soya-free, because 60% of confirmed CMPA babies are also allergic to soya. Something to do with the proteins being similar, I'm not too sure about it. So suggested that I drop this from my diet really strictly, and in a couple of weeks the hope would be that she would be getting exposed to much less of this protein through my milk, and if this was driving a lot of her symptoms, then she would be feeling a lot better and her bowel would start to recover. So I did that, and it was like if someone flicked a switch. I said, right, no more dairy. I was reading labels. But it was very easy, because I would have done anything to stop the screaming. It was that bad. So we noticed an improvement. We waited a couple of days. He felt that she needed a low-sec, but I really didn't want her to be medicated, and I was so torn about the whole thing. And we lasted a couple more days, and then I emailed him and said, no, we have to, you're right, we do need to medicate. So we did that, and within a couple of days I had a new baby, and it went from 100% screaming down to about 60% screaming. She was still very, very unsettled, had loads of the gut symptoms that she had, loads of feeding problems, but it had been toned down, so we were very relieved. Sleep was a little bit better. She might sleep for 10 minutes, might sleep for 20 minutes, things like that, during the night. So we were getting a little bit more sleep. And the paediatrician kind of said that, if we can get mum and dad to get a bit more sleep and to cope a little bit better, it makes it easier to deal with a baby that is this difficult. So we trundled along, and she was an awful lot better. And we waited the 6 weeks. She was an awful lot better, but she still wasn't. She was definitely not like my first, and she definitely wasn't a happy baby. Her eye contact was really poor. She never smiled. She didn't gurgle. She just looked miserable all the time, and it was horrible. I joined this exercise class called Empowered Mama, and I was so excited to go. I'd heard so many great reviews, and I was gonna be able to walk there. I couldn't get out the door with her, and I was so frustrated with myself that I'd signed up to something and paid all this money, and I just couldn't get my baby. I couldn't get out the door, And I remember one day, I spent the day, and I have a toddler and all this, someone who needs me, and I'm distracted with this screaming baby just all day long. Anyway, I used to walk up and down. We have a 3-story house, so the middle floor is where we live, and we have a landing. The cat is trying to get in. Hang on until I let the cat in. Sorry. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so how I soothed her somewhat was through movement. So I remember one day my husband was working from home, and he was upstairs, and one day he poked his head down and was like, you got her to stop crying, what did you do? And I was like, I've cracked it. All you have to do is walk up and down the landing while bouncing her and saying shush and tapping her and holding white noise with your phone in the sling. And I was like, I told him this as though, that's all. This is what I was doing, and I would just do it for hours and hours and hours all day. Luckily my mom and my sister had been living with us anyway, because it's a long story involving shielding and stuff, but thankfully we had extra people there to help look after my toddler, and make cups of tea and just generally be really supportive. And at the time I wasn't crying, I wasn't upset, I was just, there was a task at hand and I was focused on it, and I was like, this is what my baby needs, I just need to just get through this. She was sleeping on quite an incline. We had her in a sleepyhead pod. Now on my first baby I was so obsessed with SIDS, so obsessed with sleep and safe sleep and the lullaby trust and what guidelines were, and on Imogen I would have done anything to just get her to sleep a bit for her sake as well, you know. So she was on an incline in a sleepyhead, and we were using a Snuzza Hero MD, you know, it's one of those like going blank in the word, like a monitor, an apnea monitor. It was for anxiety management mainly for me, because I knew that if it was beeping and if it was flashing, it meant she was alive, and I didn't need to keep getting up to look into the cot to see was she alive. So anyway, we used that, and as the weeks went on things kind of improved, but we had to do what's called a challenge. So you can't really diagnose CMPA. To diagnose CMPA you have to remove cow's milk protein, be it through formula or be it through breast milk, see an improvement in symptoms, and then challenge it again by reintroducing the allergen and seeing what happens. And it broke me to do that, because I was thinking, great, we've gotten to the point where, you know, things are a little bit better, still not hectic, but a little bit better, and now I have to reintroduce it. So it was a tough one. So anyway, we did it because I was so paranoid that I was being a medical mum, that I was being over anxious, that I was medicalizing normal baby behavior, that this was in my head, all these sorts of things that I would read online play on me, and I think maybe they're right, maybe it's this, or maybe I should do the other. So I did it, and we gave normal formula again, Aptamil, and how many days did we give it? We gave it a good lot of days to see what would happen, and oh my goodness, big regrets, but it confirmed it, so it was fine. I won't get into it, the detail doesn't matter, but she's definitely has cow's milk protein allergy. When we initially when I initially went dairy free, I also went soya free, because it was something that, if she did have it and 60% of them are also allergic to soya, why would I just take that risk? I mean, I'd buy a lot of lottery tickets if I thought I had a 60% chance of winning it, you know. So eventually, at some point later on, you know, time I'm shooting ahead, we saw a dietitian who was amazing, and we went private for that. We would have been able to have a dietitian through the public health nurse and through the public system, but with COVID and everything being so stretched and people being redeployed and everything like that, again, we were in the privileged position where we had money to just go private. So we did, and we had a Zoom appointment, and at that point she was almost 6 months, so she advised that maybe we could try to give her soya formula. There was a 40% chance that she would be okay, and 60% chance she wouldn't, and it turns out she's quite allergic to soya as well, so we were like, oh. But in the meantime, I was exclusively pumping. I had a small toddler, a screaming baby, and trying to find time to exclusively pump was very difficult. I also felt extremely rejected by Imogen. I was like, you know, I Google things, does she hate me? Why does my baby not like me? I Googled newborn autism signs. How do you know if there's something seriously wrong with your baby? All these like things that I was Googling, because I just was worried she hated me. I didn't understand, she just wouldn't breastfeed. She was so unhappy, she was in so much pain. So the low sec is weight based, so as her weight went up, her dose had to be increased, and we would see, as she grew a bit, we would see the symptoms return, the reflux symptoms return, and like an inability to lie flat at all. Anyway, and so the weight would go, the dose would go up, and we trundled along like that. But we had been advised to maybe try weaning early, because some babies really benefit from early weaning onto solids. So we tried from 19 weeks, and she just had zero interest. Mouth would be clamped shut. At the time I didn't think she was developmentally ready anyway, but that wasn't the point. As she became older, and hi Veda, Kat is here, as she became more developmentally ready to take solids, she still wouldn't. She had such an oral aversion, and I suppose maybe it was quite traumatic for her, experiencing being fed things that were causing her a lot of pain, but we couldn't get her to take the spoon, couldn't get her to take purees, baby led wasn't working. Sometimes she would take a small bit in and would spit it out, just kind of, it was very difficult. So at the moment she's now 9.5 months, and she's eating a lot more. She still won't let you feed her, she still eats very little, she's still surviving a lot on formula. I'm jumping all over the place. I had been exclusively pumping, but I was finding that extremely difficult and had an awful lot of physical damage from it, which I'll make another video about someday. I really needed to stop pumping, both from a mental point of view and the fact that I was struggling with such a difficult and unhappy baby, and I also had a toddler to think about too. So, but I couldn't get her to take the formulas because they're just so disgusting, and that's what angered me about the assumption that some doctors had that mothers wanted free formula. This formula is so disgusting, you would just not want to feed it to your child. It broke my heart to feed it to her. So there's when you're introducing formulas to a baby that has, these prescription formulas, the first step is these extensively hydrolysed formula, and what that means is they've kind of done something to the proteins to make them less allergenic. So it still contains cow's milk protein, but they've just been altered enough that most babies can tolerate it. I think something like 10% can't. 10% of CMPAs can't. Of course, my baby couldn't. And it was explained to me by the paediatrician, the fact that she reacted through my breast milk meant that she was quite sensitive to it. It was quite severe. There's also two types of cow's milk protein allergy, IgE and non-IgE, and my baby would have had the non-IgE, which is mainly gut symptoms. The IgE type is the type you typically think of when you think of a reaction or an allergic reaction, like anaphylaxis type stuff. So she was non-IgE. The fact that she reacted through my breast milk, that she was quite sensitive. So it made me feel a lot better when he said, thank goodness that you were giving her your breast milk, because had you given formula, she would be in an awful worse state. Try not to cry. So I was so glad. I was like, thank God that I continued to pump. Like, it was breaking me, but thank God I did, because she could have been in a lot worse state. So we tried to get her to take the extensively hydrolysed formula, which is called Nutramigen, and we did have to. And I got loads of tips online. Use vanilla essence, mix it with breast milk, and start to increase the ratio of formula to breast milk. Strawberry Nesquik. There was just so many things. Try it hot, try it cold, try it standing on your head. I tried everything, and we did get her to take it, and with a lot of effort, and it was mixed in with breast milk. But anyway, we did. But as the days went on, all the symptoms started flooding back, and I was thinking, no, I don't want her to not tolerate this. I was like, I couldn't deal with like another plan. I just was like, this can be the plan. We're giving this type of formula, and this is what we're doing. So anyway, I spoke to the paediatrician and said, yeah. So big long discussion about it, and the plan was for an amino acid formula, which is the next step, and it's basically not milk, it's not formula, it's white powder, and it's a load of chemicals, and it smells worse than you can imagine, and it tastes worse than it smells. But I had to stop pumping. My supply had really plummeted. I was really struggling to keep up with it, and I felt in this desperately trapped situation because I had to give up. I needed to stop, but she was happy on my breast milk, but it was costing me an awful lot. And I didn't know how long I could continue, but also there was a couple of times that I ran out, and it was really touch and go. So anyway, we tried pure amino as well, because people said that it could be tolerated better. So we got a prescription, but the paediatrician prescribed that and said, maybe try that, maybe she'll take that more. And the dietitian later was very validating, saying that actually babies that have been receiving breast milk are very difficult to get onto these prescription formulas, because breast milk is just so sweet and tasty. So that made me feel a bit better, and I was like, okay. So now at 9.5 months, she loves her Neocate bottles, and we're very settled. We've had a couple of wobbles as we were weaning her onto solids. We're a bit nervous that she's allergic to egg, and once we removed egg from her diet, she reached this new level of happiness, and now she's such a happy little thing, and she's crawling and chatting and smiling and laughing, and all those worries that I had initially that, she hated me or we'd no bond, or, I was very distraught that maybe it was because I was locked out of NICU for 6 days, and maybe that was why I had no bond to her. Like, maybe she hated me because she'd been left to cry all day, because I'm sorry, but neonatal nurses do not have time to be just holding a crying baby. They've got things to do and sick babies to look after, and so I was under no illusions that she was probably left crying a lot. People are very busy in there, and she's in her own room, so it was a really long, traumatic journey, and I'm going to take another. It was a very long, traumatizing journey, and experience and very isolating. And you know, I would look at other babies. A couple of times I met other mums when restrictions were allowed, and we met outside for coffees and stuff. And like, I remember one particular day, and didn't really know these women, and she just was screaming and screaming and screaming, and they were just kind of looking at me like, but I was so used to it. I was like, I kind of nearly felt like I should just go home because I was upsetting everybody else. Her screams were upsetting other people. And I didn't want to go for walks because she just hated the pram so much. She screamed and screamed and screamed and screamed, and you just couldn't bring her for a walk. We try and drive somewhere in the car, and she hated the car seat, and she screamed and screamed. So screamed so much that she was vomiting, that she was choking on her own screams, and it just meant we were very trapped. We couldn't go anywhere, we couldn't enjoy anything. I didn't want to have her out in public because I felt like people were staring when she was just screaming so much, as though it was a judgment on me that, oh, what a bad mother, you know. And a lot of it I'm sure I made up in my own head, but I did feel very inadequate because my first daughter wasn't like this at all, and people used to all joke, she's such a happy baby, she's always laughing and smiling, and I was so naive to think it was something to do with me and something to do with how I was parenting. No, just babies have different temperaments and different problems, and sometimes babies are miserable and sometimes they're very happy. And it taught me loads in that I think I judge mothers much less now. I'm more open to when people tell me something that their baby is doing. I don't just jump straight to, you should do this or that. And I wouldn't necessarily have said it, but I might have thought it. Not a lot, but you know what I mean. Like, everyone has their own kind of way of parenting and their own way of dealing with things, and sometimes you think your way is the right way. There's lots of ways to do things, and it depends on the baby. And she's a very different baby. She's very fiery. She's very stubborn. She's very, very funny, and she's been through an awful lot. And yeah, it's so hard to. Sorry, I'm pausing, but it's just so hard to explain how awful CMPA and reflux was for us and our family. Like, it brought us to our knees. It was just, I wanted a big family. I wanted 4 or 5 kids. We bought a big house to put these children in, and I'm just like, I don't think I can do it again. What if I get another baby that has that problem? I wondered sometimes if it was because of the IV antibiotics that just wipe out her system, wipe out her gut microbiome, and we tried all sorts of things, you know, different types of probiotics, colic cam, gripe waters, Coleaf, what's that one, the burps, Infocol, you name it, we tried it. I was close to trying homeopathy. If you know anybody who has a reflux baby, if you know anyone who has a CMPA baby, it's likely that they've been going through a really tough time, and they need support, and they need people to check in on them, and they need someone to hold their screaming infant while they try not to go insane in the corner. And they need help with their other children. They need more than a typical new mother would need. What they don't need is comments like, oh, that's just normal behaviour, or that's just the way babies are, or sure, you were like that yourself, or you hear all the stuff online of what people have been putting up with comment-wise, or are you anxious, are you struggling to cope, are you a first-time mum, you know, babies cry, did you realise babies cry? Yeah, I realise babies cry, this is different. Comments like that are really unhelpful, and they really hurt. So now that we're pretty much at the other side, well, we sort of are. We have a dietitian appointment coming up soon to discuss the milk ladder and try and get Imogen back onto milk and dairy and everything, because weaning has been very irritating, because like I make her food and she won't eat it, and I'm like, well, I'm glad I went to that trouble. But I give her sachets and she won't eat it. I give her puree, she won't eat it. And you're very limited by the amount of sachets that you can give, because most things have a little sprinkle of cheese or a little sprinkle of milk or whatever. So we're very privileged that we were able to go private and get a private paediatrician. I know parents who've had to bring their baby to the emergency department and say, there is something seriously wrong with my baby and I'm not leaving until you sort this out. Some parents have been told your baby is fine, it doesn't need treatment, they're gaining weight. The thing to know about reflux, a lot of CMPA babies have reflux, and a lot of reflux babies have CMPA. And I don't just mean spewing and puking. My first baby was a happy puker. She puked rings around herself. We were constantly drenched. It was a laundry issue. She was fine. This is different. But I know parents who've had to just leave their baby just on a hospital bed and say, I'm not going home until you sort this out, because there's something seriously wrong and this is not normal behaviour. And, you know, some people will be more sympathetic and some people are less sympathetic, and the people that were most sympathetic and that were the most kind to me were people who've been through it, which is like with most things. If you go through something, it suddenly changes your outlook, doesn't it? And sometimes I wonder, did our paediatrician, did he have reflux babies? Because I feel like he understands it very well, and he knows just how mentally challenging it is. And little things like he'd say, like, if I can get her to sleep at night so that you're a little bit more rested, you'll be able to cope better during the day. And that was so true. Thank goodness we were able to tag team. Like, imagine I was a single mother, or just, yeah, it seems like such a benign condition, you know, like, oh, it's just like a little bit of an intolerance, and it can cause just so much heartache. So anyway, this big long ramble, which has turned into an extremely long video, I decided to make this video because I was frustrated reading comments by medical professionals saying really unhelpful things and really unkind things and full of assumptions and general sweeping statements. And I'm not saying every doctor is like that. You know, my best friends are all doctors. Doctors are humans though, you know, and they get things wrong sometimes, and they're overworked, and they're stretched, and they're stressed, and they can't know everything, because as the years go on, every topic, the knowledge base on it gets deeper and deeper and deeper as people research more and more and more, and you cannot know everything. But what I do want is for babies to be given the time, a proper history to be taken. You know, questioning if you have biases or if you have assumptions. Don't just straight leap to, oh, a mother's not coping. You know, sometimes there's something wrong with the baby. And yeah, and for the non-medical professionals to just offer support to those parents that have allergy babies, because I never would have realised it could be this hard. I never would have. Anyway, I'm going to stop rambling now about this. I've probably left out so much, and I'm going to be so irritated with myself when I'm watching this back trying to edit it. I'm like, you forgot to say this, or you forgot about this. But the summary of the story really is that she has non-IgE CMPA and severe reflux, which was treated with Omeprazole, which was an amazing medication, which is a proton pump inhibitor, which stops the acid secretion in the stomach. She also has used Gaviscon, and we have to use Gaviscon again in bottles when she has a reflux flare from teething or whatever. She is also allergic to soya, and we're very concerned she's allergic to egg, but I haven't challenged it yet, so that remains to be seen, and I'm hoping she doesn't, because I would just like to be able to feed her whatever we're having. But there's help out there. There's people that do acknowledge it's a thing and that it's not a feeding problem, it's not a breastfeeding problem, it's not a latch problem. There are babies that have allergies, and there's babies that have problems that you don't know about, and you know, that's important to remember too, that you don't look at every problem through the lens of your own experience. I wouldn't have known that CMP was that much of a thing before I had one. So go easy on your doctors too. They can't know everything. Their hearts are in the right place. They've put an awful lot into helping other people, so less of the doctor bashing would be nice. That's really what I wanted to say. I just wanted to tell you our little story of cow's milk protein allergy, and all the formulas we tried and all the ways we tried to solve this problem. Okay, if you liked this video or like my other videos, please like and subscribe, because it helps the algorithm and it helps people find my videos.